All right.
I'd like to call this village board meeting back to order. It's 9:15. Reminder to please speak into your microphones. The next item on our agenda for today under new business is to consider professional service agreement for 2019-2021 general engineering services. Is anyone going to give any, or are we just going to questions?
I think it's very one question, unless you want to run through it.
Does anyone have any questions on the board before I ask mine? Trustee Menta?
I would appreciate an understanding of the costs of the various applicants. I mean, I'm not the respondents. I'm not saying that that should be the basis for the decision. I really understand, you know, this is a really important contract and function of the village engineer. We've got the right company and the right personnel. But I would appreciate, was Strand the lowest in terms of the hourly rates, or where were they relative to the others?
Sure. Well, if you don't mind, before I answer that question, I would like to introduce Phil Badusek, who is with Strand Associates. He is the proposed named village engineer for Strand. So actually, the rates of course vary among the four. If you rate, and typically, based on past experience, I would say that on average, you will see billing rates from multiple, staff members from the village engineer. For example, our previous engineer, we would see on any given month hours billed from 3 to 4 different individuals. So you'll get the village engineer or PM. You would get your project engineers who would do sort of the legwork, the research, the back.
Is that this table, just so that she can reference it as you talk? The different engineers?
I'm sorry, which table are you referring to?
If you're looking at Strand, it's on page, I think it would just help, page 5. It has project engineer, quality control engineer, architect, and they all have different rates.
Yes, those would be the rates I'm referring to. So our history with Clark Dietz is what I can speak to because they have been our engineers for the last 20 plus years. The vast majority of the hours that they bill are not billed at the village engineer's rate. They're usually billed at some of the lesser rates.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I say that because if you would look at the rates of each of the engineers that submitted, for example, AIRS had the highest principal rates. They also had the highest project engineer rates, which would be the lower level. But that didn't necessarily transfer among all of the other engineers. So just because, I don't know how to.
Can I help you?
Yes, please.
Kathleen, because I have a real concern about this. If you compare Kapoor and Strand, so rates are one thing, and the way, if you just look at the two, I understand what you're saying. The rates are, this turns out to be a very much more expensive contract because in Kapoor, they break down the engineers, like for instance, an engineer won't be doing the design, the engineering tech. Like they actually have they have more people in a category, so people will get, you can bill at a lower rate.
Perhaps, but we don't know at this point what the projects are going to be from year to year.
I understand that, but there is also here a typical level of involvement, and so at 50%, what they're estimating based on whatever we proposed as our scope of services is going to be at the 120 rate, and it's a girl who has 3 years experience. So, and then I'm just saying, there's also overtime. It's double time on Sundays.
No.
No.
I can speak to that. It's,
Okay.
there's no overtime.
you're referencing a particular contract example that was included,
Okay,
and that was for construction engineering services. That is not what this contract is for.
so it was just an example? It wasn't the actual scope?
If I might have the opportunity just to respond to that sort of more broadly, more globally, you know, the evaluation and interview team, you know, we obviously interviewed all 4 of these firms and asked some pretty good questions and talked a lot about, you know, what we felt each of those firms brought to the village within their proposal. And I strongly believe that this is a decision that should be based on far more than cost.
I agree.
While Kapoor, I think, is a great firm, and I mentioned during our time together that in the pre-meeting that we had with them, Joel and I thought very highly of the representatives that they sent. But the fact remains is we have never done any work whatsoever with Kapoor.
And that should matter.
Nothing.
Can I ask
But
this
it
for a second?
does, but if I could be permitted to finish, it does matter. Because each of the other firms that submitted, you know, we have some experience with them. They have an understanding of the village, they have an understanding of its systems, and you will pay for that learning curve. You will pay for that in additional hours billed.
That can be, that is one of our, so I had asked Rebecca, and I really asked this question of you. There are so many different design and engineering services that, based on all these, you have surveying, you have construction contract management, you have inspection, you have site assessment, you have environmental, you have structural engineering, you have plan review. So, and each firm has more specialty, you know, like you can see what their specialties are. So when I say it shouldn't matter, they're all within 6 miles of us. So, I mean, maybe they didn't do extensive work on our sewer system, but Kapoor works directly with MMSD. So, and if you look at the experience, I think what one of the criteria is, are they familiar with us? But in the RFP there was more, and one of them was, what services are we looking for? Because if we're more heavily looking that knowing in the next 5 years or 3 years we're going to be mostly, you know, heavy on sewer work, then I would, in our evaluation, I would look at the firms that had that expertise and which project engineer they were assigning. Can you tell me what engineering services, because they do definitely matter, like in Strands, they exclude a bunch of services, laboratory, permit applications, utility
Yes.
design services.
Can I, so in some of your previous discussions, I was just looking through 2 proposals that I received today for an upcoming project.
Yeah.
I just want to read you something from one of them. Project fees include all tasks identified in the village's basic scope of services as detailed in our proposal. Project fees do not include costs for soil borings, hazardous material testing, water quality sampling, or fees for any agency or village permits. That is standard contractual language in any engineering contract you're going to sign, because those are very highly specialized in technical services, and most engineering firms will not have those services in-house.
But some do in the packet, and that's why I was just...
Not the ones we just talked about, no. You will always get extra costs for permit fees. You will always have additional firms sub for geotechnical.
Okay, so the question was, so one of the criteria of the 5 from the RFP that we evaluate against, we look at the proposals, is how familiar are they with us? That's one criteria. The other, I would assume, is whatever engineering type service we see needing in the next 5 years, what are we going to be heavy on? Which firm is assigning that project manager with those, because it could be, like I said, construction management, surveys, it could be utility distribution, it could be stormwater, it could be sewer and water utility, it could be road design. Do we have, like, was there services that you looked for?
Not specifically, because this is general engineering services. If you recall during our discussions, we had said we will still individually propose the major infrastructure projects. So for sewer projects, road projects, water projects, each specific project, so the 2022 road program, the 23 alley program, those will be RFP. And so,
Right. But like contract management, I saw that there was a difference, like.
no, that will also be part of those RFP
Okay,
projects.
so then we don't need a firm that would specialize in that.
Correct.
Okay, so there was some looking at the services of what we might need and what we might not need. So I'll just finish up. I studied it extensively, and the qualifications and the cost analysis that I came up with after looking at it put Kapor ahead of the rest of them. So other than that standard of, and I'm trying to get away from the standard of, have they worked with us before? They had a minority, this firm had women. So anyways, they had $6.8 million in grants. There was a lot in there that when I compared it, the content I thought was more substantial for the price.
I would make a motion to approve the engineering services agreement subject to final attorney review with Strand and Associates for general engineering services for the term 2019 to 2021.
Okay, any further discussion? Trustee Kate.
I was just gonna say that I appreciate, you're always looking at containing costs, and the diversity aspect, I really appreciate that, and with the detail. I think the reason why I feel comfortable supporting this contract is that we had an evaluation process of a selection committee that we agreed upon ahead of time, and so we didn't really plan for what if somebody on the board is not on the selection committee and comes up with a different outcome, and so it's not that we have to go with what's presented, but I'm very confident that we took a lot of time with the RFP and with determining how the selection was going to be made, and so I feel comfortable.
And I did call Trustee Warren to ask about the selection criteria, and it did not sound, I didn't get a very solid answer. It was more, they were very familiar. So what I'm looking for, I've said it, I've been very consistent about professional service agreements, is there's got to be criteria we're evaluating them on, and it needs to be looking at each proposal and then ranking the proposals based on the criteria. And the ones that were laid out in the RFP, I think there's 5, although the RFP is not attached. That would have been helpful for me to say, this firm ranked the highest on this base, to evaluate on what you said you were going to evaluate on. And so it struck me when I got the memo of, we're familiar, I've always had a gut reaction to that.
But we did RFP, we have a different vendor at a cost savings to what we were paying the previous engineer. So, I think we have benefited by going through this procurement process, and especially for these types of professional services contracts, I think there is an element of subjectivity to it. Now, my point was only, I would prefer to see the costs and the cost comparison. I'm not saying you need to pick the lowest cost, but I think it should be presented to the board. That was my only critique, but I think that there has to be some subjectivity, and that's allowed.
Trustee Warren?
President Rose, again, so I just wanted to say I very much do appreciate you looking out for the budget and looking out for costs and being very much a watchdog in this process. That's very much appreciated. And I do support the selection of Strand. I was in the room, and I do apologize. I should have provided you a better answer this afternoon. It was kind of train of thought for me, but there were certainly criteria that were applied. Now in the future, I think it's maybe an improvement opportunity in terms of how we write it up and how we kind of outline how we apply those criteria, make it very transparent, very kind of something that we can digest a little bit easier. But certainly I do support the selection of Strand, and I appreciate your comments.
Thank you. Okay, any further discussion? If not, and just one request, I always say this, could you attach the RFP scope when we have the contract award, just so we can compare what the RFP was asking for them to submit, and then
I can make note of that in minutes.
that'd be great, thank you. Okay, so the motion, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Motion carries 6-1. Thank you. Our next agenda item is a look back at the first year of collection agreement. And I think, when you say collection, is that recycling?
The contract was termed collections because it involved refuse hauling, yard waste hauling, and recycling.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Trustee Menta?
Yeah, I mean, I think I emailed some of the trustee woman, President Rozak. I mean, I looked at, if this was the correct comparison, which is from October 23rd, 2017, communication to the board, which was just the project contract cost minus the rebate total. Because my concern was, how does the current contract compare to our prior contract? And the actual, if you just look at those two line items, our cost under the prior contract was $182,000, but we were getting $48,000 in revenue for a net cost of $134,000. And our projected for 2018 was $145,000, and we budgeted for 19 $143,000. So we've gone up,